Hold on a second. The Squid Games guy directed a movie? That guy, Emmy winner Lee Jung-Jae, directed a movie? The simple answer to that is yeah. Lee Jung-Jae, best known to Western audiences as that guy from Squid Games, did direct a movie called Hunt, and I had the opportunity to see its North American premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival. But TJ, I can hear you asking, is the movie any good? Well, dear viewers, I am going to review the film using my patented ease system, so I'll be talking about the effort, audacity, stimulation, and execution that went into Hunt. But before I do, please subscribe to Cinemateq. I've got a lot more film reviews coming and I don't want you to miss them. Okay, so the guy from Squid Games directed a movie, but what is it about? In short, and with no spoilers, it is a spy versus spy thriller set in the early 1980s in Korea. The director, Lee Jung-Jae, plays the foreign chief of the KCIA, the equivalent of America's CIA, and he's on the hunt for a mole. Standing in his way is the chief of the domestic unit of the KCIA, played by Jung Woo-Sung. Side note, Jung Woo-Sung's film A Man of Reason also premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival, so stay tuned for a review of that. Both Lee Jung-Jae and Jung Woo-Sung think that the mole is in the other chief's unit, and you know that just leads to all kinds of conflict. Oh, and did I mention that they're both trying to stop a presidential assassination while all of this is going on? The stakes, my friends, are high. The synopsis ends there because to tell you any more, I would need to get into major spoiler territory, and I don't want to do that to you. Just know that this film is absolutely filled to the brim with twists and turns. Speaking of the twisty plot, let's get into the review proper and talk about the effort put into Hunt. And a lot of the effort in this film is on the shoulders of Lee Jung-Jae. Not only is he the director and star of it, but he also wrote the damn thing. And from the standpoint of Lee Jung-Jae, I think he put in quite a bit of effort. Just because he is the writer, director, and star of the film doesn't mean he's going to be putting a lot of effort behind each single one of those roles. It's actually fairly easy to imagine a scenario where a director who is also acting and writing in the film gets distracted by one thing or another and ends up putting more effort into one category over another. You can tell based on the construction of the film that Lee Jung-Jae is putting his all into each one of these roles. The direction is focused, he knows exactly what he wants to do, the plot is twisty but it's not confusing as long as you're paying attention, and his acting is pretty much on point. He plays a paranoid spy quite well. So Lee Jung-Jae, congrats for absolutely putting your best foot forward on this film. Outside of Lee Jung-Jae, there is an impressive ensemble of characters that surround him. Chief among them is Jung Woo-Sung. I don't have a lot of experience with Jung Woo-Sung's acting abilities, but I will say that in this movie he brings an intensity and a commitment that is absolutely necessary for the chief of a spy agency, and it all adds to the overall construction of the film. He's adding and not taking away, and that's absolutely what you want to see from an effort standpoint. And that is essentially true of the effort as a whole in this film. Everyone is putting their best foot forward and trying their best to make this an excellent film. So while the film does stumble on occasion, I would prefer that it be the kind of film that runs and stumbles a bit as opposed to a film that just walks and doesn't try to do anything interesting. When it comes to effort, I don't care if you miss occasionally, I just care that you're taking big swings. But what were those big swings and which ones missed? Well, now we have to start talking about audacity. Hunt is audacious in two key ways: the plot itself and the presentation of that plot. I think the plot is audacious because it's exploring a point in Korea's history that maybe a lot of people would rather forget. That was when they had a good old authoritarian dictator as a leader. And since the plot is focused on a presidential assassination and the two main characters are essentially opposing members of the same intelligence agency, you can imagine there are a lot of political elements to this story. And I have no trouble imagining an audience that might not want to relive that particular part of Korean history. The plot is also audacious because of the major plot twist, which I am not going to spoil, but I will say that I've never really seen this kind of plot twist done before. It was amazing to watch it happen in real time, that sudden realization of what was going on and what the implications of it were. So when you're doing something that I haven't seen before, yeah, that goes down as audacious in my book. Moving on to the presentation of the plot, I think it was audacious because it doesn't give a shit about you as a viewer. It gives you just enough to follow along, but it doesn't care if you decide to drop off or check your phone or something like that. You must be watching this film and you must be paying attention. And because of the way that modern blockbuster films are constructed these days, with endless amounts of exposition that constantly catch you up on the plot, whether you need it to or not, having a film jettison that idea and just stick to this notion that the audience is paying attention and that they are smart enough to understand what is going on is kind of audacious. I really respect this film for how it presented the plot. The risk here is that obviously you might end up alienating your audience. I was able to follow along while I was watching the film, but as I was getting up from from my screening, I did hear a number of people around me saying, oh, I should probably watch that a second time because there are some parts that I'm a little foggy on. That's a risk that you take when you present the plot in this way. It is fast, it is narrow, and it does not hold your hand. And once again, that's kind of audacious, which to me is a good thing. One more highlight for the audacity side, the fact that Lee Jung-Jae decided to write this specific story for his directorial debut, I think is an audacious thing to do. It's a risky thing to do, because with no experience behind the camera, it may be very difficult for him to navigate the story that he wrote. As I said, it is complex, there are twists, there are turns, and a lot needs to happen behind the scenes in order to make sure that those moments, those plot twists, pay off properly. So to write a complex script and then to say that I'm gonna step behind the camera and direct that complex script for my first ever film, yeah, that takes some gumption, that takes some audacity, and I love to see it. But obviously all the audacity in the world can't help you if your film is boring, so now let's move on to talking about stimulation. Hunt is a spy thriller, so at its core, it is really only concerned with thrilling you. And simply put, yeah, I was thrilled while I was watching Hunt. I can't remember if I mentioned this already in the effort section or not, but there are moments in the film where the effort that they put in goes a little bit overboard, but I think that was all in service of making sure that the audience stayed stimulated. There are actual scenes in this film that could have just been a couple of people talking and getting very close and getting very intense with each other, but instead, Lee Jung-Jae as a director decided to go in the direction of them having a fist fight and falling down a bunch of stairs. And like, it's a little bit ridiculous and it's a little bit over the top and it feels like they're pushing a little bit too hard, but at the same time, I got to watch a fist fight and people fall downstairs and it was done well. So I may have chuckled a little bit at it because it was a bit ridiculous, but it was still stimulating, still made me feel something, and that felt pretty good. On the downside, however, I think Hunt is limited to only thrills. You are not going to go into this movie and have a good laugh or have a good cry. You are going to be on the edge of your seat or you are going to feel nothing, and that's kind of a risk that you take when you make a pure spy action thriller. So to recap, it's obvious that this film has a lot of effort put into it, especially by writer, director, actor Lee Jung-Jae. I consider it audacious because it takes some big swings with both its plot and its narrative presentation, and in the end, it left me feeling all tingly and warm on the inside because it stimulated me quite a bit. But was it executed well? Just because you get good marks in all three of those other categories does not mean that the film is executed well. Look at a film like Miami Vice. I often talk about that film in this section because it's a great example of how you can have really high marks in effort, audacity, and stimulation, but if you execute poorly on it, you fall flat on your face and you become a cult classic. In the case of Hunt, I think it executes a number of things quite well. I mentioned before that the film doesn't hold your hand in terms of the narrative, and that could easily go awry if you execute on that plan poorly. You don't want to leave your audience feeling confused or dumb because they're not able to follow what's going on because you presented the plot poorly. While Hunt is ruthless with cutting away the narrative fat so you are only left with the bare essentials, it presents them in a way so you know what's going on if you are following along. So it's able to walk that fine line and in the end comes down on the right side of it. And yes, I know this is an action thriller and I haven't really talked about the action sequences much yet, and that's mostly because the action sequences are servable, they are practical, they accomplish what they set out to do. Nothing about the action sequences in this film are going to blow you away, except for maybe the final sequence, which is pretty good, to be perfectly honest. And I think that on occasion, the way that the action sequences are executed kind of suffers from Michael Bay syndrome, but I'm not going to knock the film too much because that is a style of action filmmaking that I think we've all become accustomed to. And in the end, the action scenes are executed well enough that they don't distract from the overall narrative of the film and the fun that you will have while watching it. The execution high point of Hunt is the major plot twist that I've been alluding to and how the film builds up to it. It's honestly something that I have never seen before in a spy versus spy movie, and in order to keep the audience guessing, the filmmakers had to carefully balance when narrative information was given to the audience while maintaining forward momentum and the audience's attention. It is not an easy thing to pull off, and I'm here to tell you that Hunt absolutely did it. But tell me, dear viewers, have you seen Hunt? And if so, what did you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you're in the mood for even more reviews of Korean action films, please check out my review of Project Wolf Hunting, which is somewhere on this screen right now.